Now we come to the first sort of practical application of things I'm talking about today. Preparation. It is possibly singly the most important part of the job. The final coat of paint you put on will never be any better than the surface it's put on. If we take this tender that I'm presently building, there are solder fillets, there are marks, there's probably grease on it from where I've handled it. All that needs to be cleaned off, and any solder runs, glue runs or whatever, they all need to be tended to. Now I use a number of tools at this stage. My most important tool, the one I use most of all, is a sharpened Swiss file. I just sharpen the end on the stone, but use polishing paper to finish it off, so it is really smooth on the end there. And you can run that across the surface and it will pick up any bits of solder that stick there, any dirt. Where you've got fillets of solder on edges there, it'll pick those off too. Very cheaply made, very easy to do, but very, very useful. Similarly, a scalpel. You can very carefully run that along. Even across paintwork, it'll take off hairs and blobs and leave the paint underneath virtually unscathed. Or you can use dental scrapers, commonly available from shows, from people like Squires. Quite cheap, but very hard and a very good edge on them. And you can either use those to get into areas like this, or on the flat, across scraping like that. And finally, that most useful and hated of tools, the fiberglass brush. This will polish the surface and take off a lot of mess. But it also leaves behind glass fibre bristles, which must be washed off at some point. But a good scrub with this on a brass locomotive or coach will polish the brass and give a good key for the primer you're going to put on. Now for cleaning, I use a three-stage process. Because I've used solder flux in the construction of this, it is covered in acid in parts. I use just phosphoric acid as a flux. I don't use a paste. The phosphoric acid hopefully should boil away as I'm soldering, but it doesn't always. And what is left does not evaporate, it stays there. So we need to wash that away. And I use flash, ordinary flash that you've polished clean floors with, but I put them in this squeezer bottle here and spray the model with it, leave it for 5 or 10 minutes. And then I take an ordinary 1-inch brush and vigorously brush all over into all the corners that I get to. And then having done that, give it a very good rinse under the tap. That's stage 1. That will neutralise the flux because this is slightly alkali. Now if it's a brass model, it'll be tarnished. And an easy way to get rid of tarnish is to use a basic toilet limescale remover. It doesn't matter which brand. This is Sainsbury's, it was cheapest in the shop at the time. You need to wear gloves because this is acidic. And you just pour it on and you can see the brush tarnish disappearing. And again, brush it in. I tend not to use a toothbrush because toothbrushes can knock off finer detail and the bristles are too short. But this is flexible enough, but also stiff enough to get in all the nooks and crannies. Then having rinsed that off, I let the model stand for 24 hours. And you will find where you've got solder, you get a white deposit. It's a powder that's produced as a reaction with the solder and the chemicals you just put on. That will need to be got rid of. The safest way is a good stiff brush with one of these and get in all the corners, get that white deposit off where the solder is. Then the last thing I do, I give it a wash in cellulose thinners. Just on a brush and just brush it all over and wipe off what I can. It's a bit difficult when you have rivets because that will catch any rag you're using and you'll have wisps of hair all over your model, so don't use anything that's too hairy or toilet or tissue. But you can just let it evaporate and that will take the grease away with it. And from now on in, you shouldn't touch your model with anything but gloved hands. And you just let it dry thoroughly for another day. Keep it somewhere dust-free. And once it's dry, say 24 hours, run a hairdryer over it just to dry off any remaining moisture. And you're ready to paint then.